Hi, I'm Carly, and welcome to Farmer Analytics. My sheep are about to lamb any day, so I need to collect fecal samples on them to get fecal egg counts as we head into lambing. I want to make sure that we aren't dealing with any parasite problems and that everyone is healthy. Check out our lab, Farmer Analytics, if you need fecal egg count testing for your livestock. And on my website, I also have a free fecal collection checklist for you to grab to stay organized on the day of collection.
I always consider the time of collecting fecal egg counts to also be a great time to check on our animals, and this is a great time to look at body condition scores, look at FOMACHA scores, as well as just the overall condition of their coats and if they're looking healthy, and especially around the time that they're about to lamb. This is super important going into lambing to make sure that they are in good health condition as they're about to give birth and then have to take care of and nurse some babies. My first step in getting ready to take a fecal sample from sheep is to get them comfortable. Give them a snack, make sure they have something to munch on, and something that keeps them basically in the area that you want them. And this might mean that you bring them to a barn, put some feed down in a feeder, and maybe that distracts them enough for you to be able to grab a sample. So the two main ways that I recommend collecting fecal samples is to either use a sandwich bag like these with a zip lock on the top, or to use gloves that you simply collect the sample in and then flip that glove inside out and tie a knot at the top of it. Now, I wouldn't recommend black gloves. These are actually the worst because if you have a black Sharpie, it's not going to work to label. So if you do have black gloves like me, I recommend using either the Ziploc method for labeling or use a lighter colored Sharpie like silver. If you are using a glove to manually take a sample directly from the rectum, lubrication is always a great thing to have on hand. That way it is more comfortable for the animal. Or you could simply use the glove to pick up the sample from the ground and then put it into the Ziploc bag. So when you're out here collecting samples, make sure that you're gloved up, at least ready to go if you see somebody go, and you are ready to grab that sample that way. So you can either stand here and wait for samples to come your way, but I am pretty impatient and don't usually stand here and wait and watch. Sometimes certain times of the day is easier than others to have that happen magically for you, but every time I come up here, nobody is pooping on demand for me. So let's get our gloves ready, and we don't need much, just a little bit. And some of these girls are small enough to restrain with one hand and get a sample with the other hand. However, my bigger adult size ewes, I actually don't have the wingspan to do that, which is why I like to set out treats and goodies for sheep so that they can keep themselves entertained. Okay, so we're going to put some gloves on. I always have one handy ready to go in case I see somebody go while I'm standing there, and then I'm going to take the rest of my gloves with me. And then I'm going to bribe everybody to stand there nicely for me with some corn, because if it's just me all by myself, I really need to be able to have a way to have those sheep be calm and right in the place where I want them to be. Now that I have everybody at the feeder eating a little snack, I'm going to see if I see anybody willingly going, and I don't want to stand here for too long. I'm just going to put a squirt of lubricant on my fingers here. Doesn't need to be a whole lot. And I'm just simply going to stay up top with 2 fingers, and that's your sample. So that was number 25. So I'm going to write 25 nice and big on the glove. Let it dry for a minute, and then we're just going to twist tie this. And there's your first sample. And if you just want to get an animal that's not paying attention to the feed like this, usually if they're small enough, you can restrain decently holding their head like this. Then you just hold here, and then you're going to go back and get a quick sample. Sometimes animals are a little bit too big to do that to have the wingspan to hold the head and reach all the way back to the bottom. I have a hard time doing that on our full-size Katahdin ewes, but our little yearling goats do just fine for me to reach that way. So we just witnessed this ewe dropping some manure right underneath herself. So this is even easier than taking a sample from the actual animal, but we're just going to grab these pieces that we saw freshly deposited. Make sure to try to remove all the grass pieces if you can, or shavings, so that you have a clean manure sample. And this is just about as much as our lab needs to run a fecal sample on an animal. I often tell people if you can fit it into a tablespoon, that's just about perfect. When you go to write the animal's ID on the actual glove, a better place to put the ID is on the actual finger of the glove, because then you're going to not tie it in when you go to twist tie the top of it. So it's easier to see. So here's an example of one that's a little harder to do by myself, just because of my wingspan isn't long enough for an adult-sized Katahdin ewe. So you can see I can kind of reach. So she actually had no sample, which can happen. Sometimes, though, trying to sample them can stimulate them to start passing manure. So it's a good thing to try, and then wait a little bit and try again, maybe in a couple minutes after you've gone through the rest of everybody. Come back to them last and see if there's anything there. So I'd suggest tying your glove first and then labeling one of the fingers so that it's easily seen. So once you have all your samples, don't forget to keep them cold. Make sure that they stay in a refrigerator or in a cooler until they reach the lab. And if you're looking for a lab to run your fecal samples, check out our lab, Farmer Analytics, for fecal egg count testing. Thanks so much for joining me today in the barn to collect samples with my sheep, and I'll see you next time.